And Harris thanked everyone for rolling up their sleeves and called them role models. Of course, she is a role model, being, of course, the first female African-American vice president of the United States. Well, let's turn to our political panel now for some analysis of President Biden's speech. I'm joined now by Carlos Scott, who is a Democratic strategist, and Marcus Flowers, who is a congressional candidate for District 14, hoping to unseat Marjorie Taylor Greene. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Carlos, I'll start with you. How do you think the president did in his speech? Did he score any points across the aisle?
Well, now, across the aisle is that's the Republicans, and there's nothing literally he could do to score points across the aisle. But with his supporters and the Democratic constituents, I feel like it was a great start. But on top of that, I feel like he has some other things that he definitely wants to roll out. And as we speak from Black America, there's a lot of things that we still want to see pass as it relates to voting rights, police reform, and things of that nature.
Marcos, I apologize, Marcus. You've heard from Carlos saying that he doesn't think President Biden can win any support across the aisle, but President Biden keeps saying that he can. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, let me say that what we saw from President Biden last night was a refreshing reminder of what it's like to be a commander in chief. I mean, in the previous administration, what we saw were the maniacal rants of a tyrant, and we've become used to that over the past 4 years. President Biden did extend an olive branch to Republicans, and I thought that some of the policies that he was extending towards them were, they're common sense things that we should all be able to get on board with. However, I was disheartened to hear the rebuttal from Senator Scott. Hearing him say that America isn't racist just makes me wonder where he's been. And if it's not racist, why am I peeling off Confederate battle flag stickers off of public property in my district? I'd invite him to come down and, take a walk with me and see if I can change his mind about that.
I was actually going to ask both of you about that, and I just want to follow up with you there, Marcus, because you are obviously, that's your party, right? So how do you justify somebody who's representing the Black population in that fashion when there's enough evidence to support otherwise?
Well, I don't want to be too critical of Senator Scott, but what we need to do in this country is take a look at our history. And for people who say things like, well, slavery wasn't that bad, it was a long time ago, no one living is around that had anything to do with it. Well, we haven't truly dealt with our history and had a conversation about it. And I think it's high time we did that. And for people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who says outrageous things that we simply know aren't true, we got to push back against that.
Carlos, do you think that that is a strong enough statement? Do you think that we need to push back more on people who simply downplay racism and slavery and the effects on the Black community?
Well, to be perfectly honest, I'm not related to Tim Scott. Let's go ahead and get that out the way. But I do agree that we need to push forward. But one thing that we cannot do is focus too much on things that we cannot change. But what we can change with the power structure that we do have is legislation. And so we have people like Joe Manchin, who's wanting to get all this Republican bipartisanship, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, the Republicans have shown themselves to be consistent with trying to obstruct any kind of Democratic-led policies, just as our two-term president, Barack Obama.
So what are your thoughts, Marcus, on President Biden in his first 100 days? I mean, do you acknowledge that he certainly is much more favorable to the Black community than the Republican Party has been in the previous administration?
Well, I'll put it this way. Whether you agree with the proposals made last night or not, everyone can agree that those policies put forward last night are there to help the American people. And, infrastructure being so important, especially things like rural broadband and public utilities and things of that nature. We need those things in our community. Policing reform is of paramount importance. Expanding Medicaid. These are all things that will help the community, the Black community in general.
And your thoughts, Carlos, I'd like to hear your thoughts on simply moving the plan forward. We've got the 100 days, but what happens next?
I think it started already today. You know, he's here in Metro Atlanta. He already met with President Carter and his wife. And, you know, you can't focus on things that you can't change. And so I love the playbook. He's got Cedric Richmond, who's been doing a lot of interviews and trying to get that messaging out. They just named, you know, Vice President Harris to lead up the charge in some other areas. And so there is a determination by this president and his administration to move this country forward. And I agree with my colleague here, Marcus, that there's just common sense legislation that needs to be pushed forward. And I think we have the right man in place to do it. You know, how he goes about it, that's left to be determined. But I do think we have the right person and the right temperament after 4 years of suffering what Trump's petulantness and acting like a child. You know, I think we're on the right path forward.
Marcus, I want to leave things with you. I have one last question, and I want to leave it with you because as a Black community, in the past, people have considered the entire Black community as monolithic. But we know there's Republicans, Democrats. You certainly are championing for the Republican Party. You've got a tough fight on your hand in your race. Can you tell me why you think you can win over voters who are clearly interested in some of the unusual rhetoric, I'm putting it mildly, of your opponent?
Okay. Be clear, I'm a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. So one of the things that I think are important that we need to look at, things that we can agree on. Jobs are important. Updating our infrastructure is important. That's important in my district because it's going to bring jobs. GA14 is filled with railroads and highways, you know, that are crumbling. You know, currently the United States is ranked 13th in the world in terms of infrastructure. You know, that's how bridges collapse. That's how roads crumble. You know, that's how lead gets into water in our schools. So let's, you know, look at ways that we can improve that. You know, let's do what we've always done. Let's trust the hardworking men and women of our country to do the job.
But it's a tough fight there for you, given the fact that the climate of what we've seen in that area, the climate of the racial overtones and so forth, the voting issues. You know, I just wanted your perspective on that. You have a tough battle.
You know, my life has been a series of uphill battles. You know, at 11 years old, I was sent to a children's home. I joined the Army at 18. I spent a decade in war zones. You know, I'm not one to shy away from an uphill battle, but I'm going to need people to join me on this uphill battle. So if you can, please, people go to marcusforgeorgia.com and donate to our campaign and help us take down Marjorie Taylor Greene, because we don't take corporate PAC money. And she's built up a huge war chest on her antics and her white hot rhetoric. As you can see, she had $3.2 million in the last quarter, okay, from 100,000 donors. That's 100,000 people saying, you know, we support this kind of nonsense and we want to see more of it in our government. She belongs no place near our governance. And I'm running to restore decency, honor, integrity, and just common sense.
Well, Marcus, we wish you luck on that. But to both of you, Marcos and Carlos, thank you so much for joining us tonight on BNC Prime Live.
Thank you, Laverne.
Take care. Well, it started out as a case of road rage. Now we're getting a look at the violent and deadly ending that has Texans asking questions. Stay with us, everyone. We'll be right back after this quick break.